You're in a train station, except something's off. The clocks all tick backward. Everyone is reading newspapers with no print. You try to speak, but your voice dribbles out like ink in water. It's only when you see your childhood home floating above the tracks that you realize you're dreaming. And then, as always, the station starts to melt. Now imagine just for a moment that someone else is watching this, not only watching it, but steering it, feeding the scene with images from your own memory, adjusting the weather, dropping in strange figures, asking questions you can't hear, but are somehow answering anyway. Honestly, when I first read this story, I had to pause and just sit with it for a while. A part of me wanted to laugh at how sci-fi it all sounded, but another part, the one that's read just enough declassified files to be unsettled, thought, yeah, they would absolutely try that. If this kind of story hits you like it hit me, consider subscribing, and hey, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from, or what weird dream you had last night. I read them all. Some of you are hilarious. All right. Now, let's slow things down and step into tonight's journey together. It begins with a suitcase, nondescript, olive drab, the kind of thing a mid-century office worker might forget on a train. But this one doesn't hold lunch or paperwork. Inside are vials of barbiturates, hypnotic scripts typed on onion skin paper, and pages, hundreds of them, filled with dream recollections from subjects identified only by numbers. And at the bottom, a memo, top secret, subject, displayed increased compliance, post-intervention. You don't know whose suitcase it is yet, but you're already walking through its history. The Cold War wasn't just fought with missiles. It was fought with minds. The CIA, ever in search of an advantage, had begun looking not just at interrogation, but influence. Deep influence. Influence that bypassed reason and reached into the unconscious. Where do you go to get that deep dreams? The program was known as MK Ultra. Le Sconset Hassen C. Lavard. Officially, it began in 1953 under CIA Director Allen Dulles, who spoke cryptically of a new kind of war, a battle for the control of men's minds. It would become infamous for LSD experiments and mind control rumors. But buried deeper inside it, like a strange subroutine, was something less talked about, a desire to steer dreams. You can almost picture the early meetings, a windowless room, cigarette smoke curling above gray suits. What if we could insert ideas into enemy agents while they sleep? Someone might have said, what if we could make them doubt? Confess. Defect. A few raised eyebrows. Then, silent nods. One mainstream historical fact, MK Ultra had over 150 known sub-projects, many hidden even from upper-tier CIA brass. Few were as obscure or as unsettling as the ones labeled sleep research. It starts small. University psychology labs get quiet grants. Professors are told to investigate hypnagogic suggestibility. They're sent crates of sedatives. In one strange case, a researcher in Boston receives a batch of synthetic mescaline, allegedly from a pharmaceutical company that doesn't exist. He's asked to monitor his subjects' dreams for ideational shifts. Translation: did their beliefs change overnight? And here's your quirky tidbit. One of the first dreams collected under MK Ultra involved a man repeatedly eating his own shoes. The researcher noted that after the third dream, the subject refused to speak English and demanded to be addressed only in Esperanto. Historians still argue whether this was the product of the drug, the suggestion, or just a very confused intern. You move deeper. At one military hospital in Maryland, a wing is quietly sealed off. It doesn't appear in any staff maps. Inside, volunteers, many of them students, prisoners, or psychiatric patients, are paid to sleep in isolation rooms. Wires are attached to their heads. White-coated technicians monitor the blinking signals of REM. Some nights, the subjects are woken every 10 minutes and asked to describe their dreams. Other nights, they're left to drift for hours as tapes play softly into their ears. It's here that something eerie happens. One subject dreams of a vast, empty auditorium. He is called on stage. A man in a black suit reads from a folder. You are loyal. You will act in your country's best interest. You will forget this message. The dream ends. The subject wakes up confused, but feels a sudden, unexplained admiration for a country he once mistrusted. That particular dream record is underlined in red. A note beside it reads, Repeat protocol subject showed elevated compliance for 36 NHRs. Now, take a breath. You start to notice something else about this research. It's not just about content. It's about control, timing, pattern. They start measuring not just what people dream, but when one researcher, known only as Dr. G, develops a theory that certain dream stages can be exploited, like doorways, brief openings where suggestion enters with minimal resistance. He calls them threshold states. One sensory-rich detail: the rooms where this happens are padded not just for sound, but smell. A lab assistant remembers the odd mixture: alcohol swabs, warm plastic, and something sweetly synthetic, like a new doll's head. Then there's a turn. Documents start going missing. A test subject vanishes after describing a recurring dream of being watched through walls. Another dies in a hotel room, found with notepads filled with frantic diagrams labeled "Not Me" and "Fake Thought." The CIA calls it coincidence. Meanwhile, the dreams themselves get darker, more controlled, as if someone's trying too hard to plant something. One night, a subject is shown a red triangle on a screen for 10 seconds before sleep. He dreams of fire, then of running, then of standing in a long line of people with no faces. When he wakes, he insists he's been conscripted. Another underlined report, another memo: visual cue successful, potential for preconditioning. At this point, you might be wondering, how far did this go? The truth is, we don't know. The program was officially shut down in 1973, but most of the records were destroyed. What's left are fragments, letters, memos, the occasional unearthed tape, enough to know that someone, somewhere, believed dreams could be harnessed and weaponized. And that suitcase? It was real. Found in an old government storage facility mislabeled as archival educational tools. Turns out, controlling dreams isn't just science fiction. At least not to the people who funded MKUltra. But if you think sound was the strangest tool they used, you're about to find out otherwise. You wake up, but something's off. Your pillow feels strange, like it's made of velvet soaked in static. The light through the blinds pulses slightly, as if matching your heartbeat. There's a mirror on the ceiling that wasn't there last night, and somewhere behind the wall, you swear you hear a typewriter. Welcome to the hospital, not the kind with gift shops and soft jazz in the lobby, but the kind with no windows on the lower floors. The kind where everyone wears ID tags, but no one uses names. The kind where you sign in once and then the clipboard disappears. It's the 1950s, and you're now part of an experiment you didn't volunteer for. The CIA had a favorite tactic in MK-Ultra plausible deniability if a patient was already in a psychiatric facility. Their reality was already in question. What better cover for experimental mind work than a diagnosis of delusion? What better laboratory than a hospital ward built to contain the fragile? You move through the fluorescent glow of a corridor in Allen Memorial Institute, a real hospital in Montreal. The air smells like old books and antiseptic. Dr. Hisi Cameron walks past, his white coat crisp, his face unreadable. You may not know it, but you're stepping into one of MK Ultra's most infamous sub-projects, Sub-Project 68. Cameron believed he could erase mental illness like you'd erase a cassette tape by depatterning the brain. How a cocktail of drug-induced sleep, electroconvulsive therapy cranked to max, and audio loops that repeated messages for days, literal days. Mainstream historical fact: some patients were kept asleep for 20 to 60 days at a time, while loops like "You are a good mother" or "You will not be afraid" played into their headphones. They woke up without memories, sometimes forgetting their children, their names, even how to walk. The CIA funded it quietly. They called it behavioral engineering. Cameron called it progress. Patients, on the other hand, called it something else once they remembered how to speak. And here comes your quirky tidbit. One subject, post-treatment, became convinced she had been secretly replaced with a more obedient version of herself. She insisted she was a placeholder, and her real self was still asleep in a room down the hall. The staff didn't exactly correct her. You make your way to another site, Lexington, Kentucky, the narcotic farm. It sounds friendly, even pastoral. It was neither. Officially, it was a rehab center. Unofficially, it was a playground for MK Ultra. Addicts were offered drugs, heroin, morphine, LSD in exchange for participation, and the studies weren't always listed in the chart. You lie on a narrow cot, the lights dimming. A voice tells you to sleep. You've been given a dose of chlorpromazine, a powerful sedative. Another whisper floats in. This is for your country, but you're too far gone to ask questions. Now here's where it gets truly weird. Some sessions included not just drugs and tapes, but scripting. CIA psychologists developed full narrative arcs for their dream influence trials. Not just commands, like "you will forget," but immersive stories. You are floating. You are safe. You have left your past behind. You are clean. You are ours. The goal: to create a dream so persuasive, so immersive, that the subject would wake up believing it was memory. And if you're wondering whether it worked, well, that's where the record gets foggy. Some files refer to high compliance outcomes. Others were redacted entirely. Just blank pages labeled Sub-Project 42 or C, attached missing. Historians still debate whether these disappeared results meant failure or success too controversial to archive. One emotionally immersive moment: imagine waking up after 40 days of induced sleep. Your family is beside you, but their names feel like lies. You don't recognize your favorite music. You speak more slowly, as if someone else is using your mouth. That's what one former patient described. I felt borrowed, like I was on loan to myself. A sensory detail. The rooms were often padded. Yes, but not all. In some trials, subjects were kept in small, tiled chambers that echoed with their breathing. The tile was cold and damp, and the most consistent memory reported wasn't pain, but the hum, a faint inescapable hum in the walls that never stopped. The more you walk these halls, the more you realize this wasn't a single project. It was a collage. Different methods, different motives. Some researchers wanted to heal. Some wanted to manipulate. Some, frankly, seemed to just want to see what would happen. And then there's the paper trail. One secretary, years later, recalled watching two men wheel a cart of boxes into the furnace room. Inside were patient files, tapes, memos. No explanation was given. When she asked if the destruction was part of protocol, one of them smiled and said, "It's better this way." In 1973, the CIA's new director, Richard Helms, ordered all MK-Ultra files destroyed. Some survived barely, because they'd been misfiled in a budget folder. That's how we know even this much. But here's a soft cliffhanger for you. One of those misfiled documents makes a cryptic mention of dream harmonics and Phase 2 stimuli integration. It's never explained. No related file was ever found. So what were dream harmonics? And why did Phase 2 never make it to paper? Let's just say the next phase would try to shape dreams not just through words or drugs, but through sound. You lie back on a thin cot, wires curling across your scalp like metallic ivy. Somewhere beyond the padded walls, someone clicks on a reel-to-reel machine. The tape sputters, then hums, and then silence. But it's not silent. Really, there's a sound just below the edge of hearing. A low, warbling frequency, like whale song slowed down and filtered through static. You feel it, more than hear it, vibrating inside your bones. It's oddly calming, until it isn't. You see colors that don't exist. Smell copper and oranges. Dream of footsteps echoing in tunnels you've never walked. Someone, maybe yourself, whispers, "Yes, I believe you." But the voice is out of sync with your lips. Welcome to the CIA's Dream Acoustics phase. While most people remember MK Ultra for its infamous LSD experiments, a quieter, stranger arm of the program was devoted to sound specifically, using sound to manipulate the architecture of dreams. One mainstream historical fact by the late 1950s. Both the CIA and U.S. Army Psychological Operations Divisions had begun exploring acoustic influence technologies. This included subliminal messaging, infrasound frequencies too low for human ears, and even tailored lullabies used in experiments on sleep suggestion. The theory was simple. If unsettling sound bypasses logic, a tone doesn't ask for permission to enter your thoughts. It just arrives. And under the right conditions, especially during sleep, it might carry something with it. You find yourself in one such lab, tucked beneath a university building in upstate New York. Officially, it's a cognitive perception research center. Unofficially, it's full of guys with crew cuts, briefcases, and polite smiles that don't quite reach their eyes. Subjects are hooked up to EEG machines to monitor REM cycles. Once the brain drops into dream territory, the tapes begin. Not just white noise, but layered signal frequencies. Think of it like an audio lasagna, waves stacked atop each other, each delivering a different message. One track plays ocean waves. Underneath that, a monotone voice recites, "You are safe. You will answer when asked. You will forget this dream." Beneath that, an even lower layer pulses with what engineers call a theta wash, designed to amplify suggestibility. And here's your quirky tidbit. One technician claimed that after listening to the theta wash for 2 weeks straight, he began dreaming in Morse code. He said the dreams were urgent, but could never explain what the message was. Another experiment involved music, twisted renditions of lullabies, slowed to unrecognizable tempos. Twinkle. Twinkle becomes a glacial, menacing drone. Played low enough, it wraps around the subconscious like fog. You shift in the cot. Your brain registers the tones, but your conscious mind has no access. In the dream, you're in a garden. Someone hands you a key. You don't know what it unlocks, but you feel compelled to find the door. Every step you take is scored by those underwater lullabies. Then you wake up, and here's where it gets interesting. Subjects exposed to audio programming during sleep often reported dream continuity across nights, returning to the same landscapes, the same dream characters. One described it as an episodic series that felt more real than real life. Researchers noted increased compliance in post-dream questioning, particularly if the dreams had included themes of authority, safety, and submission. Historians still argue whether this effect was real or simply a result of sleep deprivation and suggestibility. After all, if someone tells you every day that you're becoming more obedient and you're isolated, drugged, and dreaming in loops, you might just believe it. But some cases are harder to dismiss. In one trial, a volunteer was exposed to a specific audio script for 5 nights. You are confident. You will confess what you've seen. You are ready to release. On the 6th day, without prompting, he walked into the observation room and began detailing events from a military base he had never admitted to visiting. The details were precise. The code names were accurate. The CIA called it a breakthrough, a sensory detail. The tapes weren't always clean recordings. Some crackled with static, warbled with strange harmonics. In at least one recovered reel, the background includes what sounds like breathing, someone exhaling near the mic, again and again. Whether it was intentional or a recording glitch is unknown, but several subjects who heard that tape reported nightmares involving a watcher who hovered just behind them, whispering without lips. Emotionally immersive moment. Here it comes. One participant, a nurse recruited from a nearby town, lasted only 3 days before quitting. She said the subjects started crying in unison on the 2nd night. Not out loud, just silent. Tearful sleep, like they were mourning something they couldn't name. I didn't know if they were dreaming the same thing, she later told an investigator, but they all looked haunted, even in sleep. Eventually, the sound labs were dismantled, officially. The project didn't produce conclusive behavioral shifts, unofficially. Notes from one senior officer suggest that it was too effective in the wrong hands. You'd think that would be the end. But in a dusty archive labeled only SR7, someone finds a memo from 1962 detailing a proposal called Dreamcast. It reads, audio scripts to be encoded with narrative arcs, characters to include friendly guides and problem solvers. Long-term exposure may establish internal authority figures to reinforce compliance during waking hours. Basically, the CIA wanted to seed your dreams with helpful imaginary friends so that when you woke up, you were never really alone in your own mind. The file ends there. No budget, no outcomes, just the concept, which begs the question, did they ever find out if it worked? One file, redacted almost entirely, has a handwritten note in the margin. 3 words. Sound can stick. But what if sound wasn't the only way to stage a dream? What if they moved from tones to full-blown theater scenarios? Sets. scripts, and dream worlds carefully sculpted by unseen directors. Well, you're about to take center stage. You open your eyes and realize you're not in your bed. You're standing in a street you've never seen, under a sky that feels too symmetrical. The buildings around you shimmer slightly at the edges, like stage props under harsh lighting. A breeze blows, but the trees don't move. It smells like old wallpaper and hot plastic. Someone waves from a cafe. You don't know them, but you wave back. You're not sure why, but it feels polite, familiar. This is not just a dream. This is a set. Welcome to the theatrical wing of MK Ultra Dream scenario construction. As the CIA moved deeper into dream studies, a new idea took root. What if they could move beyond suggestion and build dreams from the ground up? What if subjects could be guided into full scenes repeating? Immersive environments designed to elicit specific reactions, truths, or changes in behavior, not dreams as they occur naturally, but dreams as directed performances. Mainstream historical fact: the CIA had already experimented with psychodrama in their interrogation protocols. In these setups, actors were hired to play parts in artificial scenarios, prisoners, interrogators, even friends meant to manipulate suspects into confession or breakdown. The transition to dreams was the next leap. They called it constructive reverie induction. It sounds harmless enough, like guided meditation at a wellness spa. In reality, it involved sleep deprivation, sensory scripting, and, yes, carefully staged dream triggers introduced right before unconsciousness. Picture this: a room, clean and gray. You're shown a series of images, say, a blue door, a red bicycle, a woman in a yellow dress with no face. You're told to memorize them. Then you're drugged, gently, with a combination of barbiturates and hallucinogens designed to shift you into REM within minutes. While you fall asleep, a voice repeats, "You are safe behind the blue door." The woman will speak. You must listen. Once in the dream, your mind builds from the material it was fed. You find yourself looking at that red bike, the faceless woman waiting on the other side of the door. The environment isn't fully real, but it's real enough. And because the dream is constructed from your own thoughts, you don't question it. Here's your quirky tidbit. One test subject dreamed a sequence so precise, so scripted, that researchers began tracking it like a TV show over 9 nights. He returned to the same hotel lobby, greeted by the same bellhop on the final night. He claimed the bellhop handed him a letter he had written himself, one he didn't remember composing while awake. And what did the letter say? Keep going. You're almost out. Emotionally immersive moment. Imagine being trapped in a dream for days, not metaphorically, but literally. Some subjects were cycled through multiple sedative sessions, with only brief moments of groggy wakefulness in between. One woman described it as a loop I couldn't exit. The dream world started feeling more stable than the waking one. The coffee shop in her head, the man who always sat at the corner booth, the clock that never moved past 2:43 p.m. When asked about the experience, she said softly, "I miss that world more than this one." Historians still argue whether these immersive dreams were constructed intentionally or were just side effects of intense chemical combinations. After all, the mind is built to make stories. Feed it enough chaos, and it'll write its own screenplay. But some documents suggest otherwise. In a recovered log from Subproject 130, researchers mention set recycling. That is, specific dream environments reused across different subjects. A farmhouse, a courtroom, a beach with unusually dark sand. Over time, patterns emerged. Different people describing the same locations, even though they'd never met, never shared data, never spoken a word to each other. One theorist called it the shared architecture. Another simply wrote, in the margin, "This isn't coincidence." A sensory detail. One of the most reported sensations in these induced dreamscapes was the feeling of weight, not heaviness in the limbs, but a pressure in the air, like humidity without moisture, a kind of dream gravity. Subjects said it felt like the world was holding them still, urging them to obey. One described it as being hugged by rules. This leads to one of the eeriest corners of MK Ultra's dream research directive dreams. Not just environments, but objectives. One trial involved 22 subjects exposed to the same pre-sleep script. You will find the room with the mirrors. You will leave something behind. And in the dream, that's exactly what they did. They described mirrored rooms, some endless, some cracked. One left a ring. One, a photograph. One even claimed he left behind a tooth, which he later found missing in real life. Coincidence, suggestion, or something stranger. A fringe possibility raised in one memo. Subjects may be conditioning themselves through narrative fulfillment. The act of completing a dream directive appears to reinforce behavioral compliance in waking hours. Translation: if your brain gets used to obeying instructions in your sleep, you may carry that obedience with you into the day. But perhaps the most disturbing file is labeled simply the marionette room. No context, just sketches of a circular chamber with dangling cords and the note "Insert Dreamer." Remove intent, whatever that means. No follow-up was found. And here comes your soft cliffhanger among the last surviving tapes from the scenario experiments. A voice is heard saying, "When you wake up." You won't remember the stage, but the actors will remember you. You press your palm to the blue door. The faceless woman opens it. The world behind her is shifting. Something's changed. Something's larger, and you're about to step into it. You walk through the door. It doesn't open with a click or a creak. It simply unfolds, like paper dipped in water. Behind it lies a hallway that stretches farther than it should. There's no light source, but you can see the floor is soft. The walls breathe. The temperature is perfect, but you're sweating anyway. This isn't a dream anymore. This is a simulation. The shift from guided dreams to full psychological simulations was subtle at first. So subtle, the subjects didn't know it had happened. And maybe that was the point. Dream control was effective, sure, but unreliable. LSD, hypnosis, subliminal sound, none guaranteed a subject would go where you wanted them to go. So what if you stopped trying to nudge the mind? What if, instead, you built a world so total, so persuasive, that the mind gave up the idea of resistance entirely? Mainstream historical fact by the early 1960s. CIA-funded researchers had begun working with early virtual environments using stroboscopic light machines, sound chambers, and even immersive role play to blur the line between dreaming, waking, and suggestion, though not virtual reality as we know it. The goal was similar: a controllable mental space with defined rules and predictable behaviors. You step farther into the hallway, a rotary phone rings from somewhere up ahead. You don't recognize the number. You answer it anyway. A voice says, "You're doing well. You're almost through. Just remember the code yellow, ash, knife." Then it hangs up. Quirky tidbit: One of the early simulation rooms was decorated entirely in beige, with carefully tuned fluorescent lighting and a white noise generator set to match the average frequency of a suburban American grocery store. Researchers found that subjects placed in this room for longer than 4 hours began reporting false memories. Some as banal as "I think I left my car in the lot," or "Don't I work here?" That was the power of the simulation. It didn't just mimic reality, it made you forget there was a difference. These artificial rooms, sometimes called perceptual anchor zones, became physical backdoors into the dream architecture. Subjects were guided into sleep within the rooms, then fed suggestions tied to their environment. You are in a safe place. You've always been here. You know the rules. Some dreams began before sleep, like a curtain already drawn. One woman spent a week in a simulation chamber modeled to look like her childhood bedroom. Every day, agents would rearrange small details books on the shelf, the color of the bedspread. At night, her dreams changed accordingly. Her brain accepted each new reality as a seamless continuation of her life story. Historians still argue whether these bleed-through experiments were ethically defensible. Some insist they were failures, but fragments of declassified memos suggest otherwise. One line from an internal report reads, "Subject Naxtharm 14 has accepted all 14 false identities provided. Dream memory fully compliant with waking personality overlays." In other words, she believed she was 14 different people and never questioned the transition. Emotionally immersive moment. Imagine waking up in a room you've never seen and being told it's yours. The bed feels like yours. Your clothes fit perfectly. A photo on the dresser shows you smiling with people you've never met. But the warmth in your chest tells you yes. That was a good day. You miss that day. Now imagine being told none of it was real. The disorientation isn't just mental, it's physical. A subject in one trial reported nausea, vertigo, and even phantom limb sensations after being removed from a long-duration simulation. "My legs still think they're in the other world," he said, gripping the edges of his hospital bed. "I can feel the tile. I can smell the floor cleaner." A sensory detail for you. One simulation involved the scent of burnt cinnamon chosen because it was both nostalgic and slightly off-putting. It was piped into the chamber through the vents. Subjects began associating the smell with safety. Later, when played a recording of a familiar voice, accompanied by the same scent, their heart rates lowered by 30%. Smell, it turns out, was a shortcut to memory. And memory was a shortcut to compliance. Another test, code-named Garden Box, was particularly bizarre. Subjects were placed in a chamber painted like an outdoor park artificial grass. Bird sounds, even fake sunlight calibrated to match late afternoon autumn. Over time, participants began to believe they had grown up there. One man spent hours tending fake flowers, claiming they were his mother's dahlias. When asked how he knew that, he replied, "Because she just told me," and pointed at a painted wall. He was alone in the room, but it wasn't all manipulation. Some simulations were designed for comfort, for healing at least. That's what the records claimed. A subset of trials focused on dream repair, using constructed environments to reduce trauma symptoms. Subjects would return night after night to safe rooms filled with soft music, warm light, and scenes from imagined childhoods that had never happened. One doctor wrote in his log, "They're healing from something, but I don't know if it's theirs." You reach the end of the hallway. A door waits. Not the paper kind, this time solid wood. Cool to the touch. You hear voices behind it. Laughter. Clinking glasses. The low hum of a party. Music from another decade. You know what happens if you walk through, and here's your soft cliffhanger just before your hand touches the knob. The world around you flickers. Once. Twice. The walls ripple like water, and behind the laughter, you hear something else. A voice whispering from inside the simulation. They're watching us now. Who and from where? And more importantly, are you still dreaming? The door swings open, not with resistance, not with effort, but as if it expected you. The sound hits first. A nostalgic jazz tune wraps around your shoulders like a velvet shawl. Glasses clink, laughter bubbles up from well-dressed strangers. The lighting is soft, golden, impossibly flattering. Everyone in the room turns to look at you, not in alarm, but in a kind of gentle recognition, like they've been waiting for you to arrive all night. You step in. This is not a party. This is a test. By the mid-1960s, MK Ultra had grown bloated with sub-projects, 149 at minimum, with dozens more rumored, hidden under different code names. Among these was a lesser-known thread, simply labeled Behavioral Echo, and that's what you're walking into now, a designed echo chamber. A social dream world built to study your reactions to influence, attraction, fear, and most haunting of all belonging, mainstream historical fact during the Cold War. Intelligence agencies worldwide became obsessed with social mimicry, how individuals conform to group norms, adopt behaviors based on peer pressure, or even change their memories to match group consensus. The CIA's interest in this wasn't theoretical. They wanted to weaponize it. Enter the dream party. Subjects were fed a mix of hallucinogens and hypnotics, guided into REM sleep, and while under looped into vivid, repeating party scenarios. In these dreams, characters were consistent. Conversations looped. There was always a toast, always a minor spill, always a stranger in the corner saying, "Don't you remember me? The room you're in now feels like that. You've never been here, but your body has. You know where the kitchen is without looking. You know that the woman in green is going to drop her champagne glass in 5, 4, 3 tinkle, right on time." Quirky tidbit. One test subject was so immersed in a recurring dream party that he developed a romantic relationship with a dream guest. He wrote her letters, left her gifts under his pillow. When asked why, he said, "Because she remembers me. No one else does anymore." Now that's devotion. Or delusion. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. What makes this phase of MK Ultra especially haunting is how it blurred the line between internal and external manipulation. Previous tests aimed to insert ideas into dreams. The dream party tried something riskier, pulling confessions out. Instead of asking direct questions, agents built entire social environments designed to draw out secrets organically. People confess things at parties. Right. Especially when everyone else is doing it. Especially when the music is perfect and the drinks taste like childhood. Historians still argue whether these simulations counted as interrogations or psychological warfare. One memo from Subproject 84 simply reads, "Target recounted incident without prompting. Believes context was his own memory. Success. Emotionally immersive moment. Picture this. You're laughing with people you trust. A familiar tune plays. Something from when you were 16. A toast is made. Someone hands you a glass. To forgetting. they say, and you nod. But the moment the liquid touches your tongue, a rush of memories floods your chest. Things you buried, things you swore never to say out loud, and everyone in the room claps, as if you've done something brave. That's how it worked. The most terrifying part, none of the partygoers were real. They were stitched together from fragments, faces from magazines, voices from old radio ads, catchphrases overheard in cafes. The simulation engine, if you could call it that, used the subject's own subconscious to populate the space, crafting the perfect social honey trap. And sometimes it worked too well. There's one case file, still mostly redacted, of a man who refused to wake up. His body came out of sedation, but his mind stayed locked inside the simulation for 2 full days. He spoke to people no one could see, laughed at unheard jokes, described music that wasn't playing. He believed he was still at the party. Eventually, he was placed in a padded cell where he murmured the same sentence for 12 hours straight. Don't go upstairs. They're not dancing up there. That's the thing with dreams. They know how to keep you where you are. A sensory detail, the champagne in the dream party was always served in slightly chipped glasses. Why researchers believed that slight imperfections in simulated environments made them more believable. A too perfect world triggers suspicion. A tiny flaw, a crack in a teacup, a light bulb flickering in the hallway grounds the dream. So, in the dream party, the chips in the glass made you think this is real. This has history. And so, you stay. Some participants developed what was later called memory bleed, the tendency to recall events from the dream party as if they had occurred in waking life. One woman confronted a coworker about an affair he never had. Another man apologized to his brother for a fight that never took place. When shown transcripts of their dream dialogues, many participants reacted with stunned silence, followed by a slow, reluctant nod. Yeah, one said, "That feels right," even if it isn't. This leads to perhaps the most chilling note found in an MK Ultra appendix: social reinforcement in constructed dreams may alter subjects' moral compass. If everyone at the party believes it, the subject will too. Meaning, they weren't just shaping dreams, they were reshaping values. You walk past the record player in the corner, it's spinning, but there's no needle. Still, the music plays. A man in a tan suit walks up to you. You said something interesting earlier. He says, about the night by the lake. You don't remember telling him that, but maybe you did. You feel the weight of the conversation before it even begins, like a story waiting to be told, rehearsed in a script you've never seen, but somehow know by heart. And here comes your soft cliffhanger. The man in the tan suit leans in, lowers his voice, and says, "They're upstairs now, the ones who make the dreams. If you're quiet, you can meet them." He points to a staircase at the far end of the room. Red carpet, flickering bulb. Your feet are already moving. Your hand grazes the banister, warm from the touch of others who climbed before you. The carpet is worn but plush, the kind that softens your footsteps and gives you the eerie sense that you're walking deeper into yourself as you ascend. The party noises fade behind you, not abruptly, but as though someone's turning the volume down one notch at a time. You're going to meet the dream makers now. At least, that's what he said. Upstairs smells like static, not ozone, not burning wires, just the charged stillness before a storm. The hallway is lined with doors. None are labeled. One has a mirror for a handle. Another is slightly ajar. and you could swear a breeze moves through it. Though the air in the house is still, this isn't just a dream. This is a manufacturing floor. Mainstream historical fact toward the tail end of MK Ultra. Several offshoot programs emerged with an even stranger focus, metacognition manipulation. In simpler terms, they wanted to not only influence what you thought, but how you realized you were thinking. It wasn't enough to insert an idea. The real trick was to make the brain believe it invented it. This is where the concept of the metadream took shape. Dreams inside dreams. Layers of false awakening designed to confuse, fragment, and ultimately reconstruct belief. Like Inception, but real. Or at least, real enough to do damage. You try one of the doors. It opens into a workshop. No, not quite. The room looks like a backstage area. Racks of costumes. Piles of scripts with names you don't recognize. And, on one table, a series of porcelain masks, each painted with eerily familiar faces, yours included. There's a low hum in the background, not mechanical, but vocal. A looped whisper of phrases layered atop one another, indistinct until you start to pick out the edges. You said it was your idea. We never asked you anything. You came here on your own. This, it turns out, is where they made the characters for your dreams. The ones who smiled too warmly. The ones who knew your secrets before you spoke. Quirky tidbit. One recovered memo from the 1970s outlines a dream archetype registry, where agents were instructed to catalog subjects' most emotionally resonant figures, teachers, exes, childhood friends, favorite fictional heroes, and build psychological composites. These figures were then used to deliver key suggestions during dreams, because who wouldn't believe something if Mr. Rogers said it? That's what made this next phase so powerful. Not fear, not confusion, but trust. And so, MK Ultra moved into its quietest, most profound zone identity dissolution. Instead of implanting orders, they began creating selves. A subject might enter a dream as themselves and wake up with preferences, beliefs, or habits belonging to someone else. Often a character built over weeks or months through subtle cues and staged memories. Emotionally immersive moment. Imagine being told your childhood dog never existed. You dig through old photo albums. Sure enough, there's no trace. Your family doesn't remember, but you do. You remember the way he used to whimper at thunderstorms, the chew marks on your favorite sneaker, the time he ran beside your bike so fast he skidded on the gravel, yelping with joy. And yet, there's no proof. Now reverse it. You suddenly recall a teacher who never taught you, a birthday party you never had, a betrayal you never experienced, but that still makes your stomach turn with shame. The memory is real in sensation, even if it's fabricated in fact. Historians still argue whether this phase of MK Ultra ever left the experimental stage. Some claim it was shelved due to inconsistencies. Others believe it went dark, folded into undisclosed programs, privatized, or contracted to third-party labs in distant countries. One of the few names that survives from this chapter is Dr. Grace Nolan, a cognitive linguist turned defense consultant. Her field reports mention recursive imprinting, the process of looping ideas back through multiple dream states until the subject mistakes repetition for truth. A sensory detail from her notes. Subjects exposed to recursive dream suggestions developed heightened sensitivity to certain textures, wool sweaters, corrugated cardboard, the sting of lemon on a paper cut. She hypothesized these sensory anchors helped stabilize new memories. much like trauma often crystallizes around a single, vivid detail. So, when you brush your hand along the velvet curtain in the dream maker's room and feel a jolt of recognition, maybe that's why. Maybe someone once whispered a new name into your sleeping ear while wrapping your fingers around velvet, just like this. You're drawn to a desk at the far end of the room. On it, an old tape recorder clicks to life. The tape hisses, and then your own voice speaks. I consent to the overlay. I want to forget. Please proceed. You don't remember recording that. And yet, you understand why you might have said it. The meta-dream phase didn't just experiment with false memories. It flirted with full personality replacement. Subjects reported waking with new handwriting, preferences for different foods, unfamiliar accents. One woman, a former librarian from Vermont, woke speaking in a clipped British dialect and insisted she had never left Oxford. They kept her in observation for 6 months. She never broke character. Or maybe she wasn't playing one. Now comes the most surreal moment of all. You move toward the final door, the one at the end of the hallway. You can't see a knob, only a faint shimmer, like heat on pavement. And then something remarkable happens. The moment you place your hand against it, the world inverts. Not violently, not suddenly. It's as if gravity softens. Sound fades, and you get the very distinct sensation that you are now asleep, within a dream, within a memory, and still walking forward. Soft cliffhanger on the other side of the door. You hear breathing, steady, measured, not yours, not close, just present, and a voice clearer than any you've heard yet says, "Come in, you've finally arrived. We were waiting to see if you'd make it to the center." But what lies at the center of a dream made by people who don't sleep? And who, exactly, is we? You step through the shimmer, and just like that, you're no longer in a hallway or even a house. You're in a room with no edges, no ceiling, no walls, only space, infinite, softly glowing, like the inside of a pearl. There's a scent in the air, lavender. Maybe, but with a strange metallic undertone, like flowers growing on the surface of a satellite. In the center, a circle of chairs, 8. To be exact, 7 are occupied. The 8th is for you as you move toward it. The occupants turn, not with surprise, but recognition. Each face is both unfamiliar and deeply, unsettlingly known, like seeing actors from a dream reenacting something you never wanted to remember. You sit. Welcome to the core of MK Ultra. This is where it stopped being science. Mainstream historical fact officially. MK Ultra was shuttered in 1973. A paper trail of memos, budget requests, and final reports suggests the CIA had grown nervous, even embarrassed, by the tangled mass of its own experiments. There were Senate hearings, public outcry, agents burning boxes of records behind Langley. You've probably seen the grainy footage, men in ties, nervously sipping water as they avoid direct answers. But those were only the visible parts. The true end of MK Ultra didn't come with defunding. It came when the project reached its limit and then kept going anyway. You're not watching from the outside anymore. You're inside the result, the dream they couldn't contain. Each person in the circle begins to speak, not aloud, not even in whispers. You hear their memories like music, layered and overlapping, with instruments made of emotion, regret in one voice, hope in another. A man remembers a conversation he never had with his mother about forgiveness. A woman recalls the day she chose to let her mind go. to escape a pain she never fully names. These aren't hallucinations. These are passengers, people who, like you, entered a dream designed by others and never fully left. Quirky tidbit: one of the most bizarre MK Ultra subprojects, Subproject 119, explored whether human thoughts could be externally tuned using electromagnetic frequencies. The files describe a hypothetical device called the HARP box, allegedly designed to harmonize brainwave patterns in groups of sleeping subjects like a tuning fork for minds. Whether it ever existed is debatable, but some early documents refer to it as the choir room. Is that where you are now? This strange circle of silence, music, and memory. You think back to that staircase, that party, that voice saying, if you're quiet, you can meet them. You were quiet. You did meet them. And now they want something from you. Not data, not testimony. They want your story. Emotionally immersive moment. You think about the time you lied to protect someone you loved. How heavy that lie became. How you sometimes dream it unfolded differently. You think about the version of yourself who told the truth instead, and wonder if, somewhere in the folds of your mind, that version kept walking. Maybe MK Ultra didn't just map your thoughts. Maybe it fractured them, sent them wandering down different dream paths. What if you're not the only you here? The chair to your left is empty now. No one got up. It's just vacant. Historians still argue whether any of this final circle, this core space, actually existed, or if it was a metaphor encoded into the surviving testimonies. Some researchers believe it was a symbolic construct used by test subjects to describe the feeling of being watched by a version of themselves that didn't quite agree. Others say the dream core was real, an actual chamber, white walls, electrodes, controlled stimuli, an echo chamber designed to turn the dreamer inward until they found their own secrets waiting in the dark. A sensory detail. One test subject swore that every time she reached the center of the dream, the air would taste like peppermint. Another said it smelled like fresh soil. Another said nothing, only smiled and refused to ever sleep again. You feel something shift. A hand rests on your shoulder. You turn and no one's there. Just the memory of a touch, but it grounds you, reminds you that you have a body, a self. The others in the circle fade, one by one, not like lights going out, but like dreams waking up. You remain, and then the voice returns. Not a dream voice this time, not the murmuring of some long-dead handler. It's your own voice, from outside the dream, calling you back. Wake up. You flinch. Wake up now. The room flickers. A pulse, like static through your bones. You are standing again. You are walking toward light, not a blinding white, not the tunnel kind. A soft, natural glow. Morning light, real light. The experiment is ending. Or maybe you're ending it. Soft cliffhanger. Just before you leave, you hear someone call your name. Not loudly, not urgently, just enough to make you turn. It's the man in the tan suit, smiling. He holds up a finger to his lips, as if to say, you'll be back. We always come back. And then the light takes you. You wake, not in a hospital, not in a lab, but in your own bed. Your clock reads 3:33 a.m. And for just a second, you can still taste peppermint. You take a slow breath in and out. The room is quiet now. No dream parties, no cryptic voices, just the stillness, that comes at the end of a long, strange story. It's a lot to carry, isn't it? The idea that your mind, your dreams, could be shaped by people you've never met, in places you've never seen, that whole lives might be rehearsed, rewritten, or even invented in the space behind your eyes. But here's the comfort. In all that strangeness, the very fact that you feel unsettled means you're awake, you're aware. And that awareness, that's something no project, no drug, no dream architect can fully take from you. So, as your breathing slows and your limbs soften into the mattress, let yourself sink deeper, not into fear or doubt, but into curiosity, into wonder. After all, dreams aren't always traps. Sometimes they're the only place we feel free enough to remember who we truly are. And if you're still holding on to the image of that staircase, that shimmer, that circle of chairs, let it fade now. Let it dissolve into mist. Whatever waited at the center, it's finished its story. You're safe. You're home. Let your thoughts drift. Let your eyes get heavy. No more questions for tonight. Just quiet. Just warmth. Just the slow rhythm of breath. And the faint echo of your own imagination curling around you like a blanket. Maybe tomorrow you'll remember more. Maybe you won't. Either way, the dream has passed and morning is on its way. Sweet dreams.